On episode 451 of Nintendo Switchcraft, favorite Nintendo Christmas presents ever. Plus, of course, Nintendo news. Those stories and more on this episode of Nintendo Switchcraft.
This is Lloyd Hannison from beautiful Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and you're listening to the Nintendo Switchcraft podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Nintendo Switchcraft, your source for all the Nintendo news that you need. You can find us recording live over at twitch.tv/runjumpstomp every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This episode of Switchcraft is made possible by patrons like Rascal. You can easily support us making more content like this for as little as $1, and as a bonus, you get all of the episodes of all of my shows 100% ad-free, so no ads in them at all. Well, except for like that stuff. Like that stuff is in there, but the actual ads where I make money, like all ad is taken out. So if you are interested in that, then make sure that you head on over to patreon.com/runjumpstomp and you get a special RSS feed that is only for patrons that has none of the ads. All right. Thank you for being cool about me not having an episode on Wednesday. I posted a Nintendo-related episode of 143 Pixels. I hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe you were driving and you had to have something to keep you entertained while you were driving, and I hope that helped. But 143 Pixels, if you are interested in that show, if you heard that one and you were like, oh man, I got to check out the rest of those, then make sure that you go to anchor.fm/143. That's the numbers 143. All right, let's get started. It is December 27th, a couple of days after Christmas, and I'm sure that a bunch of us have all been having a blast hanging out with our families and opening up gifts or watching other people open up gifts. And I wanted to talk about some of the things that I received this year that are Nintendo related. And I also wanted to talk about some of the things that I've received in the past that are Nintendo related and things that I have fond memories of from back in the day. So let's get started. One of the things that I unwrapped this year is this awesome coffee mug. It's got Mario on it. I have not poured a hot liquid in it yet, but I am going to. I recently started drinking like English tea, and because it has caffeine in it, which is nice. But I've really been enjoying that in the mornings, and I haven't made one in a couple days, but this is a cool little mug that I got for Christmas, and I can't wait to see what it does when I pour some hot liquid in it, because one of those color change mugs. Helpful hint out there for those of you that have things like this: do not put these in the dishwasher. The dishwasher will ruin them, as we have found out through other mugs that we've gotten in the past. And if you're just listening to the episode and you're like, well, I can't see the mug that he's talking about, well, I guess that, you'll just have to watch the video version this time. I'm sorry. I also got this cool little light. I don't have a battery in it yet because I don't think that we have any batteries, but it's a Super Mario light, and it has a toadstool. I mean, it's got the big mushroom. There we go. I could not figure out what it was called. It's got the super mushroom that turns Mario into Super Mario, and it looks really cool. And it's gonna go on the shelf behind. Actually, when I started the show, it was on the shelf behind me, but I reached over and grabbed it so that I could show it off because it's really cool. But it'll end up on the shelf behind me. My family knows that I have this shelf and that I love decorating it and putting stuff on there. And then this is actually pretty cool. This is essentially a Magic 8 Ball. And if you're old, like me, you probably had a Magic 8 Ball when you were a kid, which was a ball, looked like an 8 ball, like a pool table 8 ball. And on the bottom, there is a little window. And it's filled with a liquid. And there's a little... well, it's got 3 sides on it, so I'm not sure how many sides are I'm not sure what this is. I think it's like a little, it's probably a pyramid with a double pyramid, like it's a double pyramid, like a doubly terminated pyramid. And it's got like writing on it. And so you shake it up and you ask it a question. Will this episode be under 30 minutes? That's what I'm going to ask it. And it says, oh, yeah, it will. According to the Magic 8 Ball, oh, yeah, it will be less than 30 minutes. And if you're watching the show live, we have these things called shiny things that you accrue by hanging out here. And if you hit the shiny things button, you can ask the magic question block a question, although not in the middle of the show. I'll take care of that after the show. Anyway, those are the things that I got this year. And then I was thinking about what are some of my favorite Nintendo Christmas gifts that I've ever received. And I don't still, well, I still have one of them, and I'm trying to get my head out of the way. And you can see it right here. It is my Nintendo Entertainment System. I remember unwrapping that, and I was just blown away, and I had so much fun with that thing. My parents were divorced, so I went back and forth between their houses and stuff, and every weekend when I went to my dad's house, I also brought, I would unhook my Nintendo Entertainment System and bring it with me, and we would play, me and my brothers and I would play it there too. And then my brothers ended up getting one as well. So then we would just cart our games, or I would cart my games back and forth. They were my stepbrothers. And so I would cart my games back and forth between my mother's house and my dad's house. And I had so much fun with my brothers playing Nintendo Entertainment System. And it really is one of the things that started me down the road to where I am now. Another gift that I really, really loved getting, it was a Christmas gift that I got. It was the Super Scope 6. Now, I don't still have that. I ended up trading it in, I think, in order to buy something eventually. I can't remember what it was. But the Super Scope 6 was really, really cool. If you don't know what that is, it's probably because you're not an old man like me. But the Super Scope 6 was essentially like the upgraded version of the NES Blaster. And so let me Super Scope 6. I'm going to bring it up on screen for people who have never seen one, because I'm sure that people are, curious about this. And if I can bring up the view image, here we go. All right, where's the screen? So the Super Scope 6, they found like the smallest image I could find possibly. But basically, you would put the game into your Super Nintendo, and then you had this bazooka, like an actual bazooka, that you would sit on your shoulder, and you would look through like this little eyepiece, and you would shoot at the screen. And one of my favorite games on the Super Scope 6 was there was like this weird Tetris style game where basically the way that you played the game, it was like Tetris but tipped on its side, and you wanted to move these pieces down, and you would shoot them in order to make them fit into the right spot, like they were made out of glass or something. I haven't played it in obviously decades, but I still have very fond memories of playing the Super Scope 6, and I remember being extremely excited when I unwrapped that thing. I was like, oh my God. And I gotta say, at the time, I don't even really think that I knew about the Super Scope when it came out, because this was back in the day when you just didn't know about all of the stuff that was coming. Nintendo didn't tell people, like they didn't put out press releases and stuff like that. That wasn't until Nintendo didn't catch on about hyping things up until well into the life of the Super Nintendo. And so when I unwrapped the Super Scope 6, I remember looking at it and being like, what is this thing? But it was so fun, and I do wish that I still had one. Although they're kind of big and clunky, and I wouldn't really fit on the shelf back there very well. I might want to, I don't know, maybe I'll buy another couple of for those of you who are watching over on the wall here, I've got a bunch of video game controllers on the wall using guitar hooks. Maybe I'd buy some extra guitar hooks and put it on a wall someplace else in this room. But the Super Scope 6 was one of my favorite Christmas gifts that are Nintendo related that I ever received when I was a kid. And here's my question to you all. What are your favorite Nintendo gifts that you've received throughout your life for like holidays, maybe for birthdays too? I'm just curious. So let me know. You can tweet at me at RunJumpStomp on Twitter, or you can get a hold of me through email, runjumpstomp@gmail.com, and I may even read it on the show. All right, let's talk about Nintendo news. We've got a lot to talk about, actually. And you know what? Before we get there, I'm going to do a quick ad for the people who are not patrons. And, they'll hear about our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Nintendo sold a lot of consoles this week. Stick around.
Let's review the numbers. Sega Genesis is 16 bits. 3DO is 32 bits. The Atari Jaguar is 64 bits. Which is more advanced? Clifford!
All right, we're back. And I love those old ads. Clifford ads. Anyway, we've got this from VGCharts.com, and they are talking about Nintendo's sales. How many Switches? How many Switch consoles? I hate the pluralizing of Switch is really weird. But Nintendo sold many consoles, and it says right here the Nintendo Switch was the best-selling console worldwide with 1,500,000 consoles sold for the week ending in December 21st. That's 1 week. They sold 1.5 million consoles in 1 week. The Switch is like the absolute best. Like, this thing is just, what a juggernaut it is right now. And it is on track to, I think the Switch has a very good possibility of becoming the best-selling console of all time. It's got a lot of work to do to get there. I know that right now the PS2, is it the PS2 or did the PS4 overtake it? I think the PlayStation 2 is the best console as far as the number of systems sold of all time. It's been a while and it's been a crazy week, so I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think eventually the Switch is going to overtake it. There's going to be, like, people are going to have multiples in the house, especially now that they've got the Switch Lite out there. Hell, we've got 3 in our house. All right. So the PlayStation 4 was the second best-selling console that week with 667,000 consoles sold. That is, I mean, that's that's a little more than a third of what the Switch sold. And then, of course, the Xbox One sold half what the PS4 sold. And the thing that boggles my mind here, like really boggles my mind, is that the 3DS, still holding on, sold 17,000 units. If you round it up, 18,000 units. And then the PS Vita, you heard it right, folks. The PS Vita sold 36 units. 36. I mean, when you get down to a number that low, why even count it? That is just really, really weird. So those are the global hardware estimates followed by lifetime sales. So far the Switch has sold 48 million units, and in this last week they sold 1.5 million units. That means they're going to hit the 50 million mark very, very quickly. The PS4 sold 105 million units so far, and in just 2.5 years, the Switch has done half of what the PS4 has done since it came out. And I think that is very, very impressive. I think the Switch is going to eventually eclipse the PS4, especially because the PS4 numbers are going to start to die down. They're not going to sell as much very soon because a lot of people are going to look at the PS4 and they're going to say, well, the PS5 is right around the corner. We're going to get that next holiday season, so I don't really want to invest. Although right now PS4s are pretty cheap, and that's a really, really good thing. And then the lifetime sales of the Xbox One is 45 million. So the Switch has outsold the Xbox One completely. Darren Pogue in chat says the gap between Switch and other consoles is already large. Going to be interesting how Switch competes once the next gens are released. And that's a really good point, and I've talked about it on the show before. It's difficult for developers to port their games to the Nintendo Switch when they've made, like they made these games with the other systems in mind, right? And then when they port to the Switch, it's a lot of work in order to get their games to run. And if they don't do a good job, people are super critical, as they should be. But people are super critical when it's a rushed port and it just doesn't live up to what it should. And that's because the Switch is much less powerful than the other hardware. And because it's much less powerful than the other hardware, when we get the new hardware, holiday next year, I worry that we will suddenly start to see less and less ports of games from other platforms come to the Switch because it's just too costly and time intensive to bring those games to the Switch because they're made with certain specs in mind, and the Switch just cannot deliver a good enough experience with those same games. Now, that being said, the Switch has roughly 50 million units in the wild. That's enough for developers to target it. That's enough to convince developers that, you know what, we should make sure that we get games out on the Nintendo Switch, because there's a lot of potential customers that we're ignoring. So what I wonder here's what I wonder would happen. I wonder if some developers will start making games that are focused on the Switch first because they know it'll run it, and then they can port it to the other systems that are more powerful and run it even better rather than having to do it in the reverse. And yes, without a doubt, the Xbox One and PS4 offer a better visual experience than the Nintendo Switch does. However, the Nintendo Switch is ridiculously convenient because it's portable. And at a certain point, you get to you always end up at a certain point, or at least for me, where the graphics are good enough that I don't really care if they're not the best. I know that I might be the odd man out around here, but I don't think so. I think that it's actually more people are probably happy with how the graphics are on the Switch, because when do you run them next to each other? So Nintendo's never really been in this arms race for, well, I mean, they were back in the 16-bit days, but after that, they were never really in this arms race to be the most powerful console. And I think that that's a good thing. So while the gap between the Switch, the tech gap between the Switch and the other systems is going to get broader, I think Nintendo is going to be just fine. Now, there might be other people who disagree with me, and they say, hey, guess what? Nintendo might bring out the Switch Pro. I mean, listen, the Wall Street Journal has talked about this many times. They've continually said, we have information that says that there's going to be new Switch consoles that are coming. The Switch Lite, they called it, and it came. They also said that there was a Switch Pro coming, which never materialized. A lot of people, myself included, where's my Switch? Here it is. A lot of people, myself included, assumed that the Switch Pro that they were talking about was the new one, the model HAC001 and then parentheses -01 close parentheses. That's the new model of the Switch that has the improved battery life because it has a new chipset in it. A lot of people, myself included, said, okay, that's probably the Pro model that they were talking about. It's not actually a more powerful Pro model. It's just a more energy efficient chip. However, next year, in order to make sure that the arms race between Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft doesn't get out of control, is it possible that Nintendo launches a Switch Pro model in order to go along with that? And does that Switch Pro model also bring with it the Breath of the Wild 2? I don't know. It's a very interesting idea, and I'm curious as to what it's going to be called. So, hey there, Magic Cube. Are we going to get a Switch Pro next year? And it says, as I see it, tough luck. So we don't know what's going to happen. But, these hardware numbers that anytime people worry about this big tech gap, I have to point out that the Switch has sold tons and tons and tons of systems. And those developers are going to say, well, that's too many customers to ignore. All right, speaking of too many customers, this is a very, very bad segue, but that's all right. Macronix, sorry if I said that wrong, they are going to start shipments of 3D NAND, N-A-N-D, in 2020. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about this, because I don't often talk about stories that come from Anantech on this show, but apparently these flash storage is going to be used, or might be used, in 64 gigabyte cards for the Nintendo Switch. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about the cards that you get when you buy a game, a physical cartridge on the Nintendo Switch. Like here, I'm holding up my copy of Pokemon Sword, which I got for Christmas. Thank you, Santa. But I got Pokemon Sword for Christmas, and it comes with a cartridge, which is in my Switch right now. I really can't say much about that game yet because I haven't played too much, but so far I'm impressed by the visuals. But Pokemon Sword, it comes with a cartridge, right? And we have seen issues over and over and over again where developers will ship a game on a very small card or cartridge, and then you have to download a bunch of stuff afterwards. And we of course are irritated by that over and over again. You look at The Witcher, and they had a 32 gigabyte card, and that was able to hold all of The Witcher with all of the DLC, and it was very, very impressive. But when you talk about, other games, they spend the reason I'm not super excited for this 64-bit card is because time and time again, the developers, or publishers rather, have shown us that they are willing to spend as little as they possibly can in order to save money. So sure, are there going to be 64-bit cartridges available? 64 gigabyte cartridges available for the Nintendo Switch this year? I think probably. However, most developers and publishers probably are not going to take advantage of it, so it's not going to actually solve the problem, because if they buy a 64 gigabyte cartridge, then that's going to eat into their profits. Why should they do that when they could just as easily spend less money on the cartridge and make you download the stuff? And I don't know that I can find a compelling reason for the developers and publishers other than it's the right thing to do. But they're a corporation. They don't care about what the right thing to do is. They care about what's going to make us the most money. So, yeah, it's exciting that these 64 gigabyte cards exist, and that we're going to have these as a possibility to have physical sales for the Switch. But I think it's going to be very few and far between as far as who is going to use it. And I think that's probably the lamest thing anywhere. Anyway, Pat in chat says maybe the 64 gigabyte cards mean the 32 gigabytes will be cheaper for the developers. That's actually not a bad idea. I mean, listen. That's a great point. As more expensive things come out, the old stuff tends to get cheaper. If you go to the Apple store and you go to buy the new phone, they have last year's model cheaper than it was when it came out the year before. I don't know if that's the way it's going to work in in like this shipping pipeline of putting games together. I don't know if that's the way it works, but it would be kind of cool. Darren Pogue in chat says physical games is going away. This idea is 5 years too late. I get what you're saying, and while I do think that eventually physical games will go away, I think that we're still a ways off from that happening. I think that there's still going to be a lot of people who are getting their games as only physical, and I'm not one of them. I got this Pokemon Sword. I would rather have gotten it digitally. It's more convenient for me. That being said, it's also fun to unwrap stuff under the tree. You know what I mean? So when we talk about our favorite Christmas gifts, it's not as fun. Look, I got gift cards for Christmas, and it's awesome because I get to get exactly what I want, you know? It's not as fun to unwrap, and it's not as fun for the person who gives it to you to watch you unwrap it because, I get to get exactly what I want, and it's awesome. But they're like, all right, here's the gift cards that you want. You know what I mean? So it's fun to watch somebody unwrap a present, a physical present. And Vaxer in chat is saying, I like physical games. And he says, just pack the gift card in a big box. That's true. Anyway, I do agree that digital games is the way of the future, and it's going to come whether we want it to or not. And I, for one, welcome it, but I know that there's a lot of people out there who don't, so just keep that in mind. All right. Listen, I hope that you all have been saving your money, and I'm not going to talk about this for very long, but according to Polygon, the Nintendo PlayStation prototype is going up for auction. This is going to go for millions of dollars, I'm sure. This is, for those of you who don't know, back in the days of the Super Nintendo, as the CD disc, the compact disc, as a format started to take shape, Nintendo partnered with Sony. Sony made the Nintendo PlayStation, which used Super Nintendo controllers, and you would put a disc in, and you would play games on a CD-ROM rather than on a cartridge. Now, Nintendo, at the last moment, pulled the rug out from under Sony, and they said, we're going to partner with Philips instead, and they ended up bringing out the CDI, which was an absolute disaster. It was a huge mistake, because what that ended up doing is Sony they've done all this research on how to do it. So then they went to Sega and they said, Sega, do you want to work with us? And Sega said, no, we don't. We're going to do our own thing. Thanks. So eventually Sony just said, well, screw you guys. We're just going to make our own system. We'll call it the PlayStation, and we'll take over the world. And that's pretty much what they did. But this is a very interesting piece of Nintendo history, and it's so cool that it's out there. It's the Nintendo PlayStation, and I mean, it's just so crazy. Look, it even has the ABXY on the controller. I'm very, like, if you look on the video, you can see all of my stuff behind me. There's no way I will ever get one of these, but God, it would be amazing. Yeah. They already turned down 1.2 million from an offer for somebody in Norway. So this is going to go for a ridiculous price. And I just wanted to let people know about it because it's interesting. I find it interesting anyway. Anyway, that's it for today's show. I'm a little rambly today. The Magic 8 Ball, or the Magic question block, said I would get it done in under 30 minutes, and I think that I'm getting really close. So let's wrap things up, and I just closed my show notes. But that's it for today. I'm not going to do the regular outro because I closed my show notes and I don't remember what I usually say. I will say this: the music that you're hearing right now is Cornerius Star Fox remix by Note Block. It's a great song. Make sure that you check it out. Don't forget to stop by runjumpstomp.com/thank you. I'll see you guys around. Bye-bye.